Hi, Commissioner. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Now, Australia obviously has been taking the lead in the investigation. As we can see by this map, you have had so much responsibility for the investigation. This piece that's been found, how important is it at this precise moment?
It's not much of an answer except to say it's potentially important, and it's conceivable that this is real evidence of the plane's disintegration, but we're not quite sure. So it shouldn't be premature, but it does seem to suggest that the search area, the current search area, may be the right search area. It's clearly, if this is a piece of the plane, somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean, which is where we've been searching for well over a year.
And are you as surprised as everybody else, or is it just normal tides and currents that have taken it from over here to over here?
Well, remember, the plane crashed in March last year, so it's a long time ago. And according to the maps I've had a look at of tidal flows and where debris potentially could be, that would be within the range, somewhere between Réunion Island out there on the west and maybe Tasmania out on the east. That is, of course, a huge distance. Just
out of interest, I mean, you say 16, 17 months since this plane somehow disappeared somewhere. What is the level of engagement of all your governments at this point? I mean, has everybody been, working full speed for all these months, or do you have to, rev back up into gear now that something has been found?
No, I mean, there is a continuing search underway, which has been going on all of that time at, obviously, at fairly substantial expense, but the search is continuing. And if this is evidence, then that might give, if it is evidence, of course we don't know that it is, that the plane has crashed at least somewhere in that vicinity, then it'll give the searchers a bit more precision, that's all.
Now, the families obviously are torn. On the one hand, if it is a piece of evidence that gives some kind of clarity, but perhaps not the clarity that those who are really wishfully hoping would have wanted, that this plane hasn't crashed, that somehow their families are still out there somewhere just trying to get home. There's a lot of emotion going on amongst the families right now, I'm sure.
There will be, and I mean, from my experience of grieving families, they always want to use that term finality. They want to find out exactly what happened. They want to know where it happened, and of course, if conceivable, they want the remains to be repatriated and appropriately buried. But we're a long way short of that, so I think the problem is that this raises the whole issue again in the minds of the families. This will generate another outburst of grief, understandably, on their part, and we have to open our hearts to them. Of course, a very difficult time.
Obviously, all of you officials are being careful, and it's if and unconfirmed,
yeah.
And, obviously there's a lot of that. But I was really interested to hear an analyst and expert tell CNN today that actually the Boeing 777, or at least parts, are built in India, and it could very well be a reject that was tossed away and somehow ended up in the sea not so far from India. So there's still real possibilities that it may not be this.
That's right. It's still possible. I mean, these components of a Boeing 777 have serial numbers on them, so assuming...
Have they found the serial number?
I'm not sure about that, but if they find the serial, assuming they find the serial number, I suppose they will, but assuming they find the serial number, then they'll be able to work out what plane the component came from.
You also, as Australians, as the government, as the people, have another disaster to contend with, and that's the downing of MH17. Australia lost 38 people in that flight. That also was just over a year ago, in fact, last summer. And there was this extraordinary moment in the UN Security Council yesterday when the majority of people raised their hands in order to have an international, tribunal. The only standout and holdout was the Russian ambassador. Let's look at this for a second.
Those against? Thank you. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council.
So that is the Russian ambassador raising his hand against the notion of a tribunal. What is your view as the Australian High Commissioner, as the government?
Well, our government, in the words of our Prime Minister, think it's outrageous that Russia should have vetoed this resolution. To exercise a veto of that kind, I mean, 11 countries out of the 15 on the Security Council voted for it, 3 abstained. But, I mean, the really important point is in the face of an overwhelming demand from the international community, Russia has stood alone and voted against the establishment of a tribunal to prosecute and bring to justice those responsible for this atrocity, and it can only be described as an atrocity. I'm sorry, it reflects extremely badly on Russia. This isn't a biased tribunal, you know, a pro-Western or pro-American or Australian or British tribunal. This would be a completely independent tribunal, and I have to say it reflects incredibly badly on Russia that they should exercise a veto over the establishment of a tribunal like that.
What do you make of Russians who say, and senior-level officials who say, that actually this is just a politicization of this, and despite what you've just told me, that it's an unbiased attempt to find the culprit and to hold them accountable? They think it's yet another political whammy against them.
But, I mean, first of all, well, no one else fully agreed with them. I mean, no one else voted with them on the Security Council. That in and of itself is not a help to them. It's not comprehensive refutation of them, but it's pretty comprehensive. And secondly, this is a UN tribunal that was to be set up. So, I mean...
why do you think they've done this, then?
Well, I think they might like to... provide their own explanations rather than us second-guess why they might have vetoed such a resolution. But all I can say, I mean, all I can say, because just to sort of deal with your point, all I can say is that's exactly the question people will be asking. Why would you veto the establishment of an entirely independent UN tribunal? Sure. What is sometimes called grieving nations, the nations whose citizens died in this atrocity, will continue. I mean, we'll be able to set up another mechanism, there's no doubt about that, and we'll work to do that. We haven't worked out how quite yet, but we will, and it's been done before.
Does that mean the grieving families will never have an answer? But you say no, there are other...
No, I mean, we owe it. I mean, there are 38 of them in Australia, and there are 298, or 38 victims, and 298 altogether from this atrocity. And we owe it, Australian government owes it to the victims' families in Australia, but we as an international community owe it to those families to do everything we possibly can to bring the people who perpetrated this atrocity to justice, and you can rest assured we will. I mean, Australians are not undetermined people, and nor are these other nationalities. So, no, we're after those people who are responsible for this, and we'll just keep working at it.
High Commissioner Alexander Downer, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
It's a pleasure.